In this lesson, as promised, it's going to be up to you to add two new functions to users.js, one getUser and another getUsersInRoom. So right here, what I'm going to do is remove everything below our one call to add user. We'll leave that in place. And then I'm going to paste in the challenge comments. So right here, the goal is to create those two new functions. The first one, getUser. This accepts the ID of the user and it returns the user object if there's a match. Otherwise, you can just return undefined. Now, in this case, you can use the arrayFind method to get that done. Down below, the other function you're going to create is getUsersInRoom. This is going to accept the room name, and it's going to return an array of users that are in that room or an empty array if no users are in that room. And for this, you could use the arrayFilter method. Last up, you're going to test your work. So let's go ahead and together add another call to add user down below. For this one, I'll change the ID to something like 42, and I will go ahead and add Mike to the South Philly chat room. Then I'm going to add just one more user below that. I'll change this ID to something like 32, and this person's name will be Andrew, but we'll put them in a different room, like Center City. So now we have some interesting data we can test with. I should be able to fetch any of these users by their ID, and if I look for all of the users in Center City, it should just be one. If I look for all of the users in South Philly, I should get two back. So take some time to create those functions and then call them to test your work. When you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? Let's go ahead and kick things off up above by creating our first of those two functions. We'll test that out and then we'll move on to the other one. So right here, this one is going to be getUser, which I mentioned should accept the ID of the user and it should return the match if any. Now I mentioned you could use find to get this done. Sure, there are other ways as well. For us though, what we're going to do is return a call to users.find. Now remember, find returns the match if there is one, otherwise it'll return undefined if there is no match, so this actually works out really well. We can directly return the result of the find method. Now we want to supply our function, so right here we'll go ahead and get that done. We get access to the user, and we're looking for a user whose ID matches. And I'll use the shorthand syntax. So right here, that is user.id equaling the ID we are looking for. Now let's test this out before moving on to the second and slightly more complex one. Right here, we're going to go ahead and get that done down below where our users are created. So I'll create a const called user. Then I'll use getUser with one of these three IDs. I'll use 42. So right here, that is 42. And then we'll log the user out to make sure we actually get them back. And let's go ahead and run the program to test this one out. Right here, I have that object returning, which is excellent. Now, if I change the ID to something like 421 and save the program and rerun it, we can see we do get undefined, which is also what we want. Next up, we're going to create the getUsersInRoom function. So up above, let's go ahead and get that done. Right here, constant getUsersInRoom. Remember, this is what's going to allow us to show that users list in the sidebar in the browser. We are going to accept the name of the room that you're trying to look for. And down below, we'll use the arrayFilter method to get that done. So I'm going to return the result from calling users.filter. We are going to get access to the individual user in the callback function. Now remember, with filter, we want to return true if the item should be considered something that gets returned, and false if it should be filtered out and should not be returned. In this case, we want to keep all of the users where the user's room equals the room we're looking for. We want to return true, keeping that as a match and sending it back in the array. Now with this in place, let's go ahead and test our work here as well. Down below, we're going to go ahead and look for both rooms, but we'll start with South Philly. So right here, a new constant. I can just create a list called user list, setting it equal to, I'll use get users in room, and we're going to provide one of our room names. Now right here, we didn't do any sort of sanitization for this data because this data isn't going to be coming from the user. It's going to be all on the server. Now you could have added that code in there if you wanted to. If you wanted to do that, it would look a little like this. That is room equals the existing room. We're using trim, and then we're using something like 2 lowercase. This is not something you needed to do, but you could add it if you wanted to. Now down below, we're going to search for those rooms. I'll start with South Philly, and then I'll go ahead and print that user list out to see what exactly we get back. Since there are 2 members in that room, I would expect to see 2 showing up. I'll rerun the script. Right here, we get our array with both Andrew and Mike, which is great. Next up, we'll look in Center City. So right here, we have Center City. I'll save the program, rerun things, and we get just that 1 member. And if I were to type something else in entirely, let's go ahead and use a different neighborhood like Fairmount and rerun the program. This time, I would expect to see an empty list as there are no users in that room, and it's exactly what I'm getting. So now that we have this in place, we have a really great system for managing our users. We have 4 functions, allowing us to keep track of them over time. Now we're just going to clean this file up a little bit. I'm going to remove my 1 comment up above. We then have our array, our 4 methods, and down below that, we have the usage we just set up. We're going to go ahead and remove all of that as well. As long as your code was working, this is no longer necessary. So right after we create the final function, we're going to export all of these from the file. So module.exports equals an object. We have add user. Then we have remove user. We have get user. And finally, we have get users in room. So here we're exporting all 4. And in the next lesson, we're going to take advantage of these in index.js to wire up this room feature. Now, I know the last 2 videos weren't real-time application or socket.io specific, but they're just as necessary for building out a useful application. Now that we have this in place, let's jump into the next one.